Hi, welcome to Coffee with Carrie, where we are finding faith and hope in unexpected journeys. Today's guest is Cheryl Rogers, EMDR therapist and Christian counselor. She'll be sharing her wisdom on what EMDR therapy is. All right, so Cheryl, thank you so much for coming on. So background, you have been walked me through for years as my counselor, and I'm just excited for you to be able to come on. I know that mental health is kind of become a buzzword and has come with great things because of that, but then also others that I'd like for us to spend some time on. So I know that my husband jokes that if there was stock for The Broken Way for Ann Voskamp, that I should get it because I have purchased that book for so many people. And if I had $1 for every person I referred you to, we would have a pool in our backyard, So because I know the power of counseling, and I know what bad counseling looks like, and I know what good godly counseling looks like. And you were a lifeline for me and for my marriage. And so I am so honored that you're here today. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, I am honored to be here. Anytime I can show up and talk about my passion and Jesus and, and getting help and helping people, I'm going to show up. So I love that.
Will you share what brought you to become a counselor? Kind of like a little bit of background.
Sure. When I was in high school, I worked with some adults, really parents and the kids. And I just was so moved by how they were passionate to speak into people's lives and help them when they were in a hard time. And they certainly spoke into my life. And I just always wanted to be a counselor and went to college and kind of got caught up in relationships and children and marriage and everything else. And actually was in the restaurant business before I actually went back to school to get my master's degree, but did that. And I realized early on that was really my passion, is helping people. And my passion was, I think, specific around their relationship with God. Is so much of trauma, so much of what happens to in our life affects how we see ourselves and God and others and everyone around us. Yeah. And so I've been counseling for probably almost 20 years now. And it's been a great passion for mine. And every year it gets better.
You are an absolute incredible. My husband and I. So you were my individual counselor for years, and I remember coming with my little laundry list of like, okay, this is what we're going to work on, and even my husband at some point in the years that we've seen you off and on, as he said, like she has so much wisdom, and so I love that. The idea is if I'm a counselor, I'm not able to really say a lot or speak a lot, but there was so much in what you would say and what you would share that we would go home and kind of chew on because it was from the Word of God. And so knowing that was the heartbeat behind you wanting to become a counselor absolutely makes sense to me, because being on that side, of that room with you and knowing that it was always leading us to Christ. It was always sound in what you were saying. And God is a God, He's wisdom, right? He's
Yes.
wisdom. So a part of your treatment modality, and I understand that you there's different modalities, but over almost a decade ago, I heard about EMDR. And I was seeing another clinician, going through, the aftermath of divorce and wanting to do a deep dive and saying, look, I don't know, we all kind of play parts, but whatever I need, I will charge a credit card. I will go broke, but I will get healed. And I was determined. And so she was an incredible woman and, walked with me through quite a bit and loved me. And that was something that was, I think, the first time that I realized the power of being loved and the healing that you can find from that. But we had done some intensives, and I was seeing her a couple times a week. I was so broken, and I had family of origin stuff. And I had gone through counseling, hit or miss, growing up, and in, adolescence when I struggled. and even early adult, but I didn't have good counsel, right? I had a lot of like talk therapy. There was no specialty, at least that I had found when I had tried to make attempts. And I think that's what I hear a lot from people is I tried somebody, I went, it was really bad. And I'm like, it's you've got to keep trying. You've got to advocate for yourself. So, thankfully, she specialized in something I needed pertaining to that season. And then we got into family of origin stuff, and we got into my abortion, and I don't think I was quite ready at the time, but at least she was someone I'd spoken to about it. But she did EMDR. And 10 years ago, I had never heard of that. There were no social media reels, mental health. Everyone now, reads The Body Keeps the Score. But I remember when she told me about it, I was like, I don't even know. Is this witchcraft? Like, what is this?
What are they talking about?
What are we
here?
talking about?
Yes.
And I was still in that tension of, I am a Bible believing Word of God. I stand on the Word of God, the Bible. And there was this, at my grad school, I have a Christian counseling background, and it's like we integrated faith, but there's that line, right? There's that line. Yep. And I'm saying all that to say is that I identify with maybe a lot of people now that are still in that tension of, I don't really know if this is Christian, but I was so desperate for healing because I was like, I have to, the rest of my story has to turn out, and I have to be healed. And I will continue to pray through, and I continue to get inner healing. And I've had incredible experiences of deliverance. And I believe in the spiritual aspect, but I also want to take this tool and I want to use it. And she introduced me to EMDR, and we started doing EMDR, and it was helping. But I just got to a place I got really low and desperate, and a different desperate, like now I'm feeling hopeless because I've done the work, I'm doing the work, we're gaining traction. I did some intensives, I did some other things that she referred me to, but I had plateaued. Like I don't even know if I want to keep going. It was a hard time in my life because it's different when you don't want to keep going and you're in the stuff. It's another when you're fighting, like, to get out of it and to get healthier, and you're not making the headway. And she told me about you. And I think because of your faith and knowing that I was a Christian, and she always respected. I love that about her. She respected me. So there were other I could even see things like on her table, and she's like, don't even try that, like, we're not going there, right? Like things that, I could, therapist office and different modalities, like, no. But she was always honoring to who I was. But it was a God moment for me, and honestly a turning point for her to give me your number. And so I reached out to you and started saying, hey, and again, my background's in counseling. I worked with at-risk youth. I did a lot of social work. I understood, right? I had the working knowledge. And you were another EMDR therapist, and we were going to do EMDR. And so we started doing the work, but in the beginning, I did not understand what EMDR was. And I knew that it was working, but I almost thought, like I said a minute ago, is this witchcraft? I do not understand what it is. I don't understand why it works. And I need to know what it is for me to continue, right? So let's start with, what is EMDR? Like what is EMDR? How does it work? Give us the history, because a lot of people do EMDR work, but they don't know the history about it and the background.
Yeah, so EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is a very long
so
word.
hard, yeah.
I know.
It's hard to
You'd
say.
think they'd come up with something. But basically, it's a psychotherapy that is that's designed to work with trauma and traumatic memories, but also distressing life experiences. And so it starts with history or a memory, and many times that's where trauma has happened, is embedded. And then we add eye movements, which is a dual stimulus, and then we process. Right, the desensitization is the process of desensitizing or lowering the disturbance around around that trauma. And then reprocessing is helping a person's own brain, right? Their brain, their choice to decide who they want to be, their core belief, if you will. And so it is used for trauma or post-traumatic stress, but it could be used for anxiety, depression, any number of things. And so it was designed or developed in the 1980s. Francine Shapiro, the story is she was walking through the park one day and she was thinking about how stressed she was, and she began to move her eyes back and forth. And she realized that after this walk, she felt so much better and the disturbance had come down. And so then she began to work with other friends and things like that she knew on the campus. And lo and behold, EMD was developed, and then now EMDR.
Yeah.
So it goes way back to the 1980s. It is actually the most researched of any therapy that you can experience.
Yeah.
Just the research behind it. I don't think that we know exactly how it works, but what we do believe is that it uses the body's own intrinsic nature of processing like you would have during your REM state of sleep. So, except you're awake and you're in the office and we're able to talk through things. But it is very similar to that. Yeah. But I always tell people when they're skeptical, and that's okay because I think that I was skeptical, right?
Yeah.
And so I just think that when we're skeptical, it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to test it, see if it works. But I always say, they didn't know how penicillin worked either for years, but it worked, and they knew it worked. So, so that's kind of how I describe it to people, or just try it and see if it works for you.
Yeah. And it is neat how God will bring capital T truth to anyone, even if we don't understand. So science will discover something.
Exactly.
And so here she is going on a jog. And I think here's God here. It's bubbling up truth. And it has impacted people's life. I mean, exponentially. I mean, there's so many stories, even just in my backyard, in my community, of people saying, gosh, now I'm doing work, and I'm doing EMDR, and other modalities are coming out of it. And some of the research I did during that time was, CBT is another treatment modality a lot of people know about, right? And so seeing it apples to apples, and you're right, like all of the evidence. I mean, the EMDR for, performance anxiety, for athletes use it.
Yes.
For natural disasters, they can do it in a group setting. But all the research that's been done, it's EMDR. Is it EMDR for the World Organization for it? And then you compare it to the other leading treatment for trauma, which is a treatment trauma-focused CBT, and apples to apples. What I discovered is that they found that people are more likely to come back to treatment with EMDR. It is not only more effective, but it takes less sessions.
Exactly.
Yeah,
probably half.
And
so 50% of the sessions.
Yeah.
So it's, I always call it, do you want like regular open heart surgery, or do you want laser surgery?
Laser.
Really, sign me up. That's what I would want too. So I'm just here to help you with that.
Yes.
Yeah. I think the reputation happened because of the trauma, because what they were using it mostly for in the 80s was Vietnam veterans. And they'd come back to the country, and they were, to our country, and yet they were still struggling. And so they were like, well, let's use them. So they started with veterans. And so that's how it kind of got its design of, trauma. But it's true, PTSD. But now it's recognized by, so many in the World Health Organization, to every other place to do EMDR. And it's an option for clients.
Another thing that I like about EMDR is that it does not pathologize people. And so here we are, 2025. And I can't get on Instagram without, do you have someone that is a narcissist in your family, or all of these buzzwords, right? And so what I loved about EMDR is that it didn't say there's certain diagnoses that you just, where the, not the world, but the clinical world, there are certain diagnoses that people are like, oh, you can't, that's, they're just kind of a lost cause. You don't even want to have those kind of clients. Or even now in like pop psychology world and all of this is we're labeling people, right? We're labeling people, and EMDR at its core says we don't even necessarily believe in labels and diagnoses. We believe that the brain has experienced a hurt, either a small T trauma, a large T trauma, and it's doing what brains do. It's and it needs to be healed. And so I love that there is no pathologizing, calling someone toxic, calling someone, borderline, someone a narcissist. Can you speak into that?
Yeah,
What your thoughts are?
I think that's an important aspect of trauma itself, is that when the brain has experienced trauma, there is always an autonomic response, but there's also a fight, flight, or freeze response, or a fawn response, and that is the brain telling that person that there's danger. And so when you have traumas that have happened early on in their life, they've learned to respond to any type of threat. The brain goes into a threat mode. And so now we have the coping mechanism, and that's where you see some of these labels that come that help them, I guess, categorize people. And so I think that it's important just to realize that, trauma is trauma. And whether it was as a child, whether it was a teenager or adult, you can still have the same responses and the coping mechanisms that go with it to help them survive in life. It is, we all have that. And I'll just say that we all have things that have happened to us too. And I really believe that is true, that we all have some aspect of disturbing or distressing life experience or trauma that has happened to us. And so when we look at it, nobody is immune from that.
No, they're not. They're not. And which kind of makes me think of the next thing I wanted to ask you about. I wanted to pick your brain on piggybacking the last question. So mental health, super stigmatized, especially in the 80s, 90s, and the early 2000s. I mean, I had to like sneak away to go to counseling, it's gonna, right. Like, where's all your money going? I don't know. I got old shoes on, but now it is popular. It's a trend. It's a trend to talk about mental health. It's no longer a stigma for the most part. At least I feel like in the generation that I'm in. And I think, personally, I think it's incredible. I think we've grown leaps and bounds. And I think that because of that, people are getting set free. Because of that, there's healing that's happening. Families that are staying intact. Recovery and addiction, reconciliation, and just a sound mind. God told us in his word that we did not have a spirit of timidity, but of power and of love and a sound mind. And I think that is our inheritance. And I know that I had to stand on that for many times. Like, I don't care what my genetics say. I don't care that I struggle with anxiety and depression. Yeah. This is my inheritance, and I believe that I can have a sound mind. And so I say this with all sensitivity. I love the fact that we are now able to talk about mental health, but I want to talk a little bit and hear your take on the other side of it becoming a trend and becoming a buzzword. Do you find that because of that, in our humanness, we are using that to almost still not get the help? Because now we're calling things that they are, we're going to counseling, we're labeling what we need and what we have, but we're still kind of in our inhumanity. Okay, this is what we've done. So I have this label, or I struggle with this, or I know I'm like this at home. And because I say it, that's healing and that's treatment. And that's not the hard work that I understand.
Yeah, I think that it is good that it is a trend and it's more acceptable.
Yeah.
For folks that need help, and so I do think it's a buzzword. But I think sometimes it takes finding the right counselor also is that even like we use the word self-care, and now everybody uses self-care, right?
Yeah.
Are they really doing self-care? Who knows, right? But I think that the litmus test is, are they experiencing relief?
Mm.
Not just, identifying those things and going because I've identified it, but are they experiencing relief? And so I hope and pray for folks that that when they wake up in the morning, they recognize, I feel better than I did 6 months ago in counseling, or in a year ago, right?
Yeah.
I feel better. I am better. I see myself through a different lens. And that would be the thing I would ask them about finding the right counselor and doing the right work that they want to do, is what are their goals?
Yeah.
Is it just to be one of the group that goes to counseling, or is it really, do they have goals in mind? Things that they realize, I really want to change this about myself. Because really, as well as I do, counseling is all about, what do I want to change about myself?
Yeah.
And so, you had to determine that when you came in. I want to change this about myself.
Yeah.
And that is very much at the heart of it.
Yeah. Taking that accountability.
What is the goals they have
Yeah.
when they come in? So,
So for you, I know a strong woman of God, and hear daily in and out trauma and stories and holding that sacred place for people, which I think, I don't know, and how high that up is on a ministry, but that's certainly a ministry for you to sit in that space with people and see them, and let them show you their worst sides, their most vulnerable sides, their most broken sides, and trust you enough for you to not only sit in it with them and love them through it, but then to give them resources and to give them hope, right? And empower with them. But a part of that is impacted not only emotional and cognitively, but is spiritually. And so can you share the impact that you have seen that trauma and hurts can play in their people's faith and their relationship with the Lord?
yeah, absolutely. I think that faith and, mental health, it's a holistic approach to a person. It's how, we look to faith to help not only define us, but to ask God why. Why am I this way? Why did this happen? Right? To make meaning out of it. And we look to our faith to find that. But we also go into counseling trying to make meaning out of trauma. Like, why did this trauma happen? And so I think that I think those are interrelated as we look at trauma. I think that trauma can affect us in a way that makes us want to hide, and changes how we see ourselves and others, but it also changes how I see God. Because if I believe that God allowed this, then what does that say about the safety of my world? And that's what trauma, tells us, is I may not be safe in the world. And, how could God allow this? And so I do think it's important in trauma processing to be able to distinguish, like, what are those answers? Because they need those answers. Folks need those answers when they've gone through something difficult. They're looking to God, like you said, for their identity. And that's how I see God, is he is my identity, and I should be who he says I am. And yet after trauma, that's not always the same. It doesn't always line up. And so when I see that people are struggling in their area of seeing him and seeing their creator for who he really is, that's what I get passionate about. And I think that that's my biggest passion, is working with people in trauma to resolve that filter that they see God through, because, he is their creator. He is everything. And so I think that that's, when I see both of those, they are intertwined. They have to be.
For post-abortion, for post-abortive counseling, again, you see all types, and probably within the same client, like myself, you see all different things and their walk and their life, and from young to present day. What would you say for those? Because a lot of people that are listening have either had an abortion or had some type of infant loss. what would you
Yeah.
say to someone, and share like the impact, I guess, as a clinician on
Yeah.
the your side of the table? What do you see how it impacts women? Because I one of my passions is for people to be educated on the reality of what happens to a woman post-abortion,
Mhm.
how she's impacted with spiritually, emotionally, relationally. And so as a therapist, what do you see when you've had women in your office walking through and processing?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I do see this a lot, and I think that it is as individual as the person,
Mm-hmm.
and unique as that. And I think that at the root of that is still trauma. The one thing that I think is that steals from us and robs from us is the shame. No matter what we've been through, it's the shame that impacts us when we've gone through something. And so when we look at trauma, it's just the way that we don't feel safe. And so shame can hide from it, can hide us, it can isolate us. And so when you're talking about somebody with trauma, how many times they, and I have walked this walk myself in my own traumas, is begin to isolate myself. And the shame kept me from connecting and believing for healing, believing who God says I am, in every way, what I'm worthy of, that we can make mistakes, that we can ask for forgiveness, like all of those things. And shame can keep us from knowing the truth of who God is and what He desires for us. And so I think any woman that is struggling in any of those areas, again, it's unique to each person, but are they stumbling over some of those things? Are they really seeing themselves as, a daughter of the King,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And so, do they see themselves as valuable and worthy of all of His love? Not just a little bit, but all of it.
Mm.
And so I think trauma can rob them from seeing all of that. And I think with trauma too, when things happen to us, we tend to attach negative beliefs about ourselves, like, I'm damaged. So there's an example more clinically when someone comes in is this trauma has happened, so I must be damaged, or there must be something wrong with me, or I'm not
Mhm.
enough, or I'm right. And so I
Mhm.
think that that's where trauma work can really help them, to process the trauma itself, to be restored, right, and healed. But also, I think with that too is to see on the other side of that. And clearly, you've done your work. So I think that holding hope for them. And that is an important thing that I do as a counselor, and also for resilience afterwards and really being restored. And so I think that that goes with the trauma work,
Yeah.
afterwards, and resiliency on the other side of that.
Yeah. I like how the EMDR protocol is going to the root of the held beliefs. And that held belief to me is equivalent of the root, right?
Mhm.
So where other talk therapy or other types of counseling, we're dealing with the symptoms.
Yes.
And I think symptom management absolutely has its place. I
Mhm.
have family that have OCD traits, have a tic disorder, have things like that, and other
Mhm.
things that you even with trauma you need management skills for the symptom. But with EMDR, that protocol is what's your core belief in this moment? Like you
Yes.
said, is I am unworthy, or I am
Mhm.
damaged, or I am unlovable. And just like the Lord, He takes it by the root and He
Yes.
pulls out and pulls out the all of the shrapnel, just the
Yes.
lies, and processes it. And I know there were times when I would leave the counseling session, and we would do like little weekend ones. I'd have my daughter, on the opposite schedule, and so I'd be like, okay,
Mhm.
we're gonna work
Mhm.
on this,
Mhm.
and we're gonna
Mhm.
stay, get on this, and we'll do this, and but what would happen, I thought, I experienced with EMDR is that days later, which is
Mhm.
what she says, and what the research and what
Yes.
you read is, it's almost like a Rolodex. It's rewiring, it's reprocessing your mind,
Yes.
because it went to the root, and then now all of the prongs are right, or all of the symptoms, and so it was like I would be a couple days later going, I could almost physically, and I know it sounds odd, but like think like my
Yes.
mind is like tick, 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 like, and so
I do.
it's insane. And then I would find myself in other settings, not even understanding the connection, like you had mentioned
Yes.
early on, that your brain does what brains do. It's doing its function. It says, okay, you were laughed at in front of the class in second grade. So every time, and then you know, Johnny, took your, speech, whatever, in theater, and then Mrs. So-and-so said this about you. So anytime you come in public speaking, it's
There it is.
being the brain. It's doing what it does. It's
Yes.
compartmentalizing. It's finding patterns, and it's saying, is this safe? This is not safe. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reprocessing is what I thought was just incredible is as it was reprocessing and putting things in their place, then I would be in settings and go, oh my gosh,
Exactly.
where is this? I don't feel the way I usually feel. I don't respond the way I usually respond. And it was empowering.
Mm-hmm.
It was empowering, and it was so crazy because you're thinking that. And so I obviously am its biggest fan. I need a t-shirt or something for EMDR, but it's just been a great tool, a
Yes.
great tool. A question that some people find, and I'd love to ask you about, is let's say you've done the work with the EMDR, you've worked through that isolated event, and you have found freedom. And so, like I just said, you find yourself, you come back and you're checking in with your counselor, and you're saying, "Gosh, I'm not triggered. I'm not dysregulated like I usually am." And these are even other environments that I'm finding that since we did this work, I'm gaining more ground over here. But now I'm still emotional in some moments, and I'm still feeling, and I'm still crying. Would you say that means that they're not healed? What would you say if somebody says, "Hey, I am healed. I have worked through this, but sometimes I find myself things coming up."
Yeah, I think two things when I answer that is one, just the structure of EMDR is always past, present, and future. So as you're talking about the brain, is that when we work on past events, now we found ourselves not as triggered. And so, we're thinking, oh yeah, just like you said, we've processed in the brain, and now something shifts in the brain, but it's what shift is how I see it. How I see myself is different. And so I go into a different environment, and then I'm not triggered as much, and it just feels so great, right? But sometimes we haven't yet gotten to the place where we process present triggers, and that's where some of that emotion has come from, or it's the future. We have an anniversary that comes up, and now all of a sudden, okay, I didn't realize that. I thought I was over it. Now we went through the anniversary, and now I'm very sad. So there's that aspect of it. It's just the integration of the brain from past, present, and future. So when someone's doing work, we want to make sure they're going all the way through that, right? And clinicians are helping them in the future. So it doesn't mean they have not done the work. It doesn't mean that the work they've done is not complete, right? It just means that there's a little bit of tweaking going on that still has to be done. And then we have to look at also grief. And so when we have trauma, right, we can have healing on the other side of it. Many times for them with trauma, there's loss. So we have trauma, and then we also have grief. And grief is actually grieving that we didn't have, or grieving that which is what we lost. And that would be some of the emotion that is connected to it, as I'm grieving that. And so it doesn't mean the trauma has been processed, but that's just the humanness of grieving and realizing perhaps what they lost or what they didn't have anymore. So all of it is normal. It is just the brain and the body and how it works, and the emotions that are very much a part of us.
So your line of work is, I know, is very tough. What keeps you grounded? What keeps you coming back? Because it's certainly a mission field, and I don't think that it's for the faint of heart. And so, what keeps you grounded, and why do you keep doing it?
I keep doing it because I'm so passionate about what I do. I think that it's not cut out for everybody.
Yeah.
And And so I question that myself,
Right.
but how it is. I have to say that I have to really protect my brain, my mind. So I have to really set boundaries for myself. Just personal to me. But I never watch the news. My clients are the one that tells me what's going on from day to day, because I have to be very guarded in what I feed my mind, because I work with trauma day in and day out, all day long. And
Yeah.
so I do think there is self-care. I do set limits for myself. I do have a balance of work and life. But as far as the traumas themselves, I feel like that self-compassion is a very important aspect of any kind of self-care. And I practice that myself and have to practice that and teach it to all my clients, because self-compassion is my ability to recognize that we're all in this together, and we've all had trauma. So when I hear someone's trauma, I hear it, but I don't hear it as far as I hear it the aspect of where they're going, not where they're stuck at, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's more like somebody comes into my office, I hear it as, oh, okay, so I'm going to help you get over this bridge. And so I just walk beside them across the bridge, but I don't get stuck in where they're at, if that makes sense.
Because you're seeing it like an aerial view.
An
Like you're
aerial
seeing
view.
the map.
Right. I'm seeing it and the aspects of healing. And so it looks like, okay, let's talk about treatment planning and what will this look like for you. So I know I'm taking them on a journey. It's, a journey of healing. And so I'm just there to walk beside them across the bridge, but they're the ones that are actually doing the work. I mean, you were the one that was actually doing the work. I was just walking beside you through the whole process. However, I have been on the other side of the bridge, and I know that we can get you there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I know there's people listening right now that are counselors, and I just to hear some tidbit of wisdom and how you keep going on. And also I would love for, now that mental health is becoming something that's more acceptable, that there's more honor in Christian counseling, because that really is a mission field. And I believe you exclusively almost work with Christians, and a lot of them in ministry. And so for the casualties happening every day, I'll tell you about it later because it's in the news, but all of the just the reports that we're hearing, I know that the Lord is showing and sifting and saying, that's enough, and I believe God is a God of so many chances, and will continue to, even when we fall. I mean, I'm on that side of it completely, but I do think God tries to lead us to repentance in the quiet and in the, behind the scenes before he has to make drastic measures, because he thinks of all of his children and all of the sheepfold. And so unfortunately, we've seen a lot in the church, that's happening, a lot of just a lot of things happening in churches falling and people falling. And I would think, my thought is that if we encourage more, and many other things, it's not just like one thing, accountability, discipleship, that's a whole other topic, but absolutely the giving pastors, giving people in ministry an expectation that they will go to counseling, that they will go to a safe place, that they need to go through some hard work and probably do some stuff, even if they came from quote unquote the best home, that they are bearing a lot, and they're stewarding, and they're pastoring. And so to have us to, now that mental health is becoming more acceptable, my prayer is that ministry will find your services and the countless other great Christian counseling out there that do EMDR and such, to say, no, this is a part of you on staff. This is something that you have at your discretion. Or even we say, hey, during sabbatical, let's touch base with a Christian counselor, because it's needed. It's absolutely needed. And you guys are the unsung heroes, because you are on the back of it, hearing and enduring these things. So these men and women in ministry can continue to do what they've been called to do, right? And so it's the body
Yes.
of Christ working together. But I believe that Christian counseling is such an important part of the body of Christ. Is we need you, and we
Yeah.
need good ones. So as we kind of close out, I would love for you to speak to someone that is in an unexpected journey right now. It could look like anything, right? It could be some of the topics we talked about today, or anything, and they do not have hope, and they are at a crossroads, and they don't know what to do, and they might consider going to counseling. What would you say to someone that's listening?
Yeah, I think, I think about this a lot. Like, what the first step is the hardest one, right? The first step is the one that takes the most amount of courage, right? When you decide, okay, I'm finally going to do it, and I pick up the phone and call someone.
Yeah.
And so I do think that takes a lot of courage. I would encourage them um, to one, pick up the phone and call someone. If it's an EMDR therapist, that's fine. They can do that. But connect with someone that gets them. And so if that is an area of trauma, then connect with a trauma-informed therapist. If it's a marriage issue, connect with somebody that understands where they've been and can understand what they're going through. I think that makes it easier to get past some of the shame that comes with needing help, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't always like to admit that we need help. We want to can do it ourselves kind of
Yeah.
thing. But I do think that picking up the phone is the hardest thing. But if the first counselor does not work and it's not your personality or style or anything else, like, don't let that stop you. Is to keep picking it up, or ask them, ask the counselor, who else can I be connected to? I mean, you used, several counselors, and you found out each one is different. Like I said,
Yeah.
counselors are not equal.
Yeah,
right.
This is very true.
And so it has to match, what they feel safe with, who they can trust. And then there's a personality thing. And if it's someone that is faith-based, then find that person that is faith-based. But don't stop with the first time, because it may take more than that to find someone they're really, really comfortable with.
Yeah, I love that. I've heard that a lot of people saying, well, I went once. And you're like, no, that's why I love ending with
Yeah.
that, is go more than once and find the right counselor and do the work.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope that it's called you to action, called you to seek healing, and most importantly, called you closer to the heart of the Father. If you want to learn more about today's guest, we'll have their links in our bio. Until next time, God bless and take care.